This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, Dolly Parton. I don't discuss American culture on this program. I talk politics. I have my favorite songs, my favorite performers, but I don't know enough to comment about Dolly Parton other than telling you this is a tough one for everyone. Not today. Not today. There might have been a time for this, but not here. Not today. Well, as I said, this is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for joining me. Let me get on with the show. What am I going to ask you to do here? Check out davidfeldmanshow.com. That's what I'm going to do, a little self-promotion to reset here. Hey, if you want to see all the news stories I'm reading in order to prepare this episode, hit the show prep menu over at davidfeldmanshow.com. It's updated every 15 minutes. These are all the late-breaking stories, either sitting or about to sit on my desk while I'm prepping the next episode. So hit the show prep menu throughout the day if you want to know what I know. And then, and I mean this, people say, are you serious? No. Go host your own podcast. Can't be any worse than the bat guano I'm peddling. Hit the show notes menu over at David Feldman Show. Download the file. It's the one I'm working off right now to spew this effluvium you're hearing right now. It's all the facts, all the figures and bullet points that I'm relying on, all organized into a somewhat coherent series of slides that might convince low information podcast listeners you actually know what you're talking about. Yes, download my show notes and become a mediocre con artist, just like David Feldman. In all seriousness, my show notes are posted after each episode. And yeah, they're useful study guides, conversation starters, or in my case, conversation enders. Feel free to download them and get the message out. And as soon as you can figure out what that message is, tell me, because I'm dying to know. I go live every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:05 p.m. I have no idea what I'm saying other than I have no life. So look at my show notes from today's show, hit the contact button, and tell me what I'm trying to say. Okay. We only have 70 days until Tuesday, November 3rd, and that's the midterms. We only have 60 days until early voting starts. So I want to address two listeners. One of my listeners asked me to explain why Hakeem Jeffries was meeting with Jared Kushner. Another listener attempted to correct me after I claimed last week that Mike Johnson and the Republicans will do everything they can to prevent the new House, assuming Democrats win, from getting sworn in on January 3rd. January 3rd is when the 120th Congress is supposed to be seated. So that's what I want to talk about today. Why did Hakeem Jeffries meet with the odious Jared Kushner? And is one of my listeners correct when he said I'm wrong for claiming Mike Johnson, if Republicans lose, Mike Johnson will do everything he can to keep this new Congress from getting sworn in? And I said he might succeed. Remember, we're talking about the House of Representatives, which is why we need a landslide. The Senate, I don't think John Thune and the Republicans in the Senate are going to mess with the election results. I'm talking about the House of Representatives and what so-called constitutional scholar Mike Johnson is capable of. So it's all related. The thing really starts on November 4th, the day after the midterms. And I know it's the last week before Labor Day. I get it. You don't want to hear this. You might remember, though, the plan for January 6, 2021 was to run a stress test on the United States Constitution, partly out of intellectual curiosity, but mostly because Trump's lawyers were and still are fascists. Not liking the results of the 2020 presidential election, they wanted to test the idea of the vice president's role being more than just ceremonial when it came to certifying the presidential election for Joe Biden. And I hate to tell you this, and some people disagree, but this is what's in store for us on January 3rd when the 120th Congress is supposed to be sworn in, and should Mike Johnson, constitutional scholar that he is he going to give up the gavel to Hakeem Jeffries? I've been reading and talking to some people who know the laws, and they assure me that what I think might happen on January 3rd, they assure me it will never happen. Why won't it happen? Because they tell me can't happen. It's illegal. Well, that's why I think it's going to happen. Or at least I think there's a plan for this to happen. I believe the plan is, if the Democrats win the House of Representatives, not the Senate, the House of Representatives, I believe the plan is on January 3rd, right before the 120th Congress is supposed to be seated, Mike Johnson, constitutional scholar, will fire the clerk of the House of Representatives. Now, the clerk of the House of Representatives is like the speaker in that they serve only after being elected by members of the House. Before a new Congress is sworn in, before a new speaker is chosen, it is the clerk from the previous Congress who gavels the new 120th Congress into session on January 3rd. It is the clerk from the previous Congress, previous House of Representatives, who provides the continuity. The clerk's job, traditionally, is to gather all the certifications from all 50 states, certifications authorizing their respective House members to be seated and collectively sworn in. And right there is the problem, because on January 6, 2021, Republicans tried to redefine the role of vice president on January 6. I have no doubt that they will try to redefine the role of clerk on January 3rd. So you remember the false elector scheme, and that was for the 2020 election. You remember that scheme. I'm telling you, if we see House races in reliably red states flipping blue, Trump and his team of lawyers will be on the ground challenging those results, demanding recounts, sowing enough doubt to push Republican leaders in those reliably red states not to certify the election of any Democrat who flips a red congressional district blue. We'll get some resistance if it happens in Georgia or Indiana. Those are Republican-controlled states, I don't think they will fall for this. But there are other states where we're going to see Democrats flipping red seats, and it's going to be confusion, and Trump thrives off chaos. For example, Arizona has a Democratic governor. It has a Democratic Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State is in charge of elections, but Arizona has a Republican-controlled state legislature. This is a recipe for just enough chaos for the midterms to be turned over to the Supreme Court. That's the plan. That's the plan. What we're going to see are election deniers in all these states rising up, demanding recounts, screaming fraud, creating chaos, demanding the Secretary of State, doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican, they're going to demand the Secretary of State not certify these results. And even if the Secretary of State certifies the election for a Democratic House member who flipped a red seat blue, there will be members of the Republican members of the new 120th Congress who will challenge the seating of any Democrat who flipped a red seat blue. And the clerk will be powerless to stop these challenges, because these challenges can only be resolved by a full vote of a House of Representatives that has yet to pick a speaker, a House of Representatives that hasn't even been sworn into office yet. So this is total chaos. This is what Trump lives for. This is what he creates. And the clerk will be in charge. So the clerk is supposed to last a day. We had trouble getting a speaker with McCarthy, but the clerk seats the new Congress. Traditionally, they elect a new speaker, and it's supposed to be off to the races. But that's not what the plan is. We saw what happened when McCarthy, how hard it was for McCarthy to get sworn in, and the chaos that Trump was orchestrating from Mar-a-Lago. That's the plan. So the new clerk will eventually be elected. But at any time, a speaker can fire the clerk and name a temporary replacement. So, like I said, if Democrats win back the House of Representatives in the lead up to January 3rd, there will be so many lies about stolen elections that Mike Johnson will appear to feel justified right before adjourning the 119th Congress on January 3rd. He will appear to be justified in firing the clerk and replacing that clerk with a partisan hack to gavel in the new 120th Congress on January 3rd. He could pick anybody like himself. He can pick J.D. Vance, because you're not allowed to be the clerk if you're also a member of Congress. But Johnson will be a member of Congress, but he will not have been sworn in yet. But he could pick J.D. Vance to be the clerk of the House. It's just legal enough. And I spoke to some people about this, and they said, no, it can't happen. It can't happen. And I kept saying, what country do you live in? It's just legal enough. And it's not about the legality. It's about the loopholes that drag this out. There is what is legal, what is constitutional, and then there is what is traditional. And traditions rely on norms, which Donald Trump destroys. Trump is water. If there's a leak in the Constitution or the laws, God bless Donald Trump. Like water, he will find that leak. Tradition, norms, are eventually used by the courts to seal up those leaks, but it takes time. And that's what all of this is about. Create chaos, stretch things out, and Donald Trump either gets the Supreme Court to decide, or better yet, invoke the Insurrection Act. So, I've been talking about the Green Bay sweep for years, since January 6th. That was the plan, the Green Bay sweep. It's Vince Lombardi, the Green Bay Packers, and it's about flooding the zone. Just flood the public square with so much garbage, nobody can keep track of what the laws are, what's being broken, who said what. That's called the Green Bay sweep. And the Green Bay sweep took into account, this is what they called the plan on January 6th. It took into account that the role of the vice president, yes, is purely ceremonial when it comes to certifying a presidential election. They knew that. However, J.D. Vance doesn't. He has repeatedly said had he been Mike Pence, he would not have certified the election for Joe Biden. But the plan for January 6th was they expected that the Supreme Court would rule, yes, the vice president's role is purely ceremonial. And they would have said, no, the Supreme Court would have eventually ruled, no, it's a ceremonial position. Mike Pence doesn't get to decide. The plan was, of course, the Supreme Court's going to rule against us, but it'll take time to make that decision. And their plan back then was sow enough chaos in order to justify Trump invoking the Insurrection Act and making the question of whether or not the vice president's role in certifying an election, just make that irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Trump invoked the Insurrection Act. The Green Bay sweep was all about creating so much chaos in the lead up to Joe Biden's inauguration. The 12th Amendment would kick in, and the election would be thrown into the House of Representatives by the Supreme Court. And if it got thrown into the House of Representatives, because of the way votes are counted, each state gets only one vote, Biden would have lost. That was the plan. They gamed this out in mid-2020 when they began to realize Trump was going to lose. I believe if the Republicans, starting on November 3rd of this year, can sow just enough doubt, just enough chaos over results in key swing states that we're in districts that go from red to blue, and that will determine control of the House of Representatives. I believe by the time we're supposed to swear in the new 120th Congress, Mike Johnson will either fire the clerk and give himself that job just seconds before the 119th Congress adjourns, or he'll appoint J.D. Vance as clerk of the House, or some Republican hack so that when the new 120th Congress enters the room, it will be a Trump supplicant holding that gavel, acting as the de facto speaker. I hope this is paranoia, but history tells me it's not. I hope I'm wrong. But I do know Democrats have gamed out this plan that the Republicans have already gamed out. And that is precisely why Hakeem Jeffries met with Jared Kushner. More on that in a second. I'm going to explain to you why Hakeem Jeffries met with Jared Kushner. So the plan for January 3rd is the original plan for January 6th. The Green Bay sweep, flood the zone, drag it out, and either invoke the Insurrection Act or go to the Supreme Court and have them decide the election. Peter Navarro, who is currently serving again in the Trump White House, and Steve Bannon refused to testify before the January 6th committee. Why? Because they were the chief architects of the Green Bay sweep. And the two of them went to prison for contempt of Congress rather than go on record, testify under oath, and expose what the real plan for January 6th was. That story of Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon being the first White House employees or friends of Trump or friends of the president to serve time for contempt of Congress, that story, what they left out in the coverage was these were the architects of January 6th, and they weren't going to testify. The plan, their plan, was legal. At least they thought it was. They weren't planning an insurrection. The Green Bay sweep was a legal coup. But Trump destroys everything. He destroyed the Green Bay sweep by inciting an insurrection that day. He stirred up the goons who went crazy, and they broke down the Capitol and tried to kill Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. It was the storming of the Capitol that ruined the Green Bay sweep. That wasn't the plan. Violence was not the plan. The plan was a legal coup, and they're going to try to do it this time on January 3rd if the Democrats win the House of Representatives. Believe it or not, it was the violence that day that saved us from Trump possibly serving another term. It was the violence and, of course, Mike Pence. But yesterday, Mike Pence just said Trump needs to go back into Iran and finish the job. So F Mike Pence's profile and courage. You know, he had his moment, and now he's back to being Mike Pence. But on January 6th, I'm telling you, this is what they're planning, and history is prologue. On January 6th, right as the barricades got breached, Texas Senator Ted Cruz was challenging Joe Biden's 11 electors from Arizona. So the Green Bay sweep was working. He was working with Congressman Paul Gosar, that racist lunatic. This was the Green Bay sweep in action. Slow the certification process down. Make it take days to certify the election. Create so much tension. Have people gathering around the Capitol, but not violently. And the plan was create so much doubt and chaos, the Supreme Court will do what it did in 2000 and hand the presidency to the Republican candidate, this time by citing the 12th Amendment and throwing the election into the House of Representatives where Trump would win. That was the plan, to get the Supreme Court to say, we don't know if there was voter fraud. We can't. That's not our job. The only way to decide is have the House of Representatives. And decide it. The insurrectionists destroyed that plan. Trump destroyed the plan because he destroys everything. And this is what you really have to keep in mind, because this is what we're up against. This is not pickleball. This is football without a cup and without a helmet. This is the Green Bay sweep with no protection. The Green Bay sweep was kicked off by two of the most horrible people in Washington, Paul Gosar of Arizona and Ted Cruz. And this is what they did right before the insurrection began. They issued a formal objection to Arizona's 11 electoral votes for Joe Biden. And as that was happening, the Capitol cracked open and they all had to evacuate the building. Why were they challenging the electoral votes? Even though they knew, Gosar and Ted Cruz knew the challenge would eventually go down to defeat, right? They had the phony elector scheme in Arizona, another slate of electors they wanted seated, but they were never going to get seated, and Ted Cruz and Paul Gosar knew that. But what was factored into the Green Bay sweep was any objection to a slate of electors would force the House and the Senate. This was a joint session of Congress. You object to a slate of electors, that automatically triggers a 2-hour debate where the Senate has to meet privately and the House of Representatives, they have to meet privately. And the plan was drag those debates out through procedural motions. They're only supposed to last 2 hours, but you know how to drag things out. Make the certification process go on for days, if not weeks. So eventually the Supreme Court must intervene and say it gets decided by the House of Representatives. Or Trump, if it got really bad, if the protesting got bad enough for Trump to spin it the way he wanted to, he would invoke the Insurrection Act. So, delay until the court throws the election into the House of Representatives. And again, this is what we're up against if Democrats win the House. If Democrats win the Senate, I don't think we're going to see this. But it's the House. All the gerrymandering, all the redistricting, all the court cases, this is all about control of the House of Representatives. One final thought about January 6th, just to show you who these people are and what we're up against. Right after the worst attack on our nation's capital since the War of 1812, January 6th, Congress reconvened to certify the election for Joe Biden. There was the stench of feces and tear gas. I'm sorry, that's Donald Trump's bathroom in the Oval Office. But that's the Congress smelled of feces and tear gas. And some of the Republicans who were in on the Green Bay sweep after the insurrection, they changed their minds. For example, Lindsey Graham, after the insurrection, voted to certify. He said, I'm done with Trump. But Cruz, who was challenging Arizona's electors right as the Capitol got invaded, Ted Cruz, when Congress reconvened, they took up, the first thing they did was continue. Ted Cruz, are you still going to challenge Biden's slate of electors in Arizona? Yes, he was still willing to, after January 6th, Ted Cruz was still willing to delay the certification of Joe Biden. Well, that didn't happen. The insurrection was so bad, even Republicans, some Republicans, decided to stand up to Trump. And nearly none of those Republicans who voted to certify for Joe Biden are left. Very few are still left. This time around, on January 3rd, inside the House of Representatives, I don't think there's anybody who's going to be returning to the House of Representatives, any Republican, who voted to certify for Joe Biden in 2021, because Trump owns the House of Representatives. Not quite the Senate. He's getting there, but he owns the House of Representatives. And the clerk of the House, whether it be Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance, or the current clerk, I believe his name is Kevin F. McCumber. That clerk will be facing challenges to seat every new Democratic member of the new Congress. This will be happening. This is assuming Democrats win the House. This will be before Congress is even sworn in. There will be challenges on seating newly elected Democratic members of the House of Representatives who flipped a seat from red to blue. That is the plan. Now, whether that comes to fruition depends on whether Democrats win the House and by how much. Or if they win the Senate, it's not going to happen. And if they win the Senate and the House, it's also not going to happen. Or if they do try it in the House with Democrats controlling the Senate, it won't be as dangerous. But this is the contingency plan that Trump and his psychopaths have in the works. First, destroy the midterms. So much doubt about the results, Republicans like Mike Johnson will have just enough political cover to insist there were voting irregularities on a scale so massive we cannot allow Democrats to steal this election once again. And then he fires the clerk and installs a Trump loyalist to serve as the de facto Speaker of the House when the 120th Congress gets sworn in. Last week, I said there are enough loopholes ripe for exploitation to make it impossible for the 120th Congress to get sworn in. One of my listeners said, there are not. The rules are very specific. Well, I'm glad my listener contacted me, and I'm glad they know what the rules are. I've talked to constitutional experts who agree with my listener. They all say there's law and there's tradition. I say there's law, there's tradition, and then there's fascism. And this is why Hakeem Jeffries, who will become Speaker should Democrats win back the House, this is why he met with Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, let me state up front, should be in prison the same way his father was in prison and probably still should be for life. But I'm not defending Jared Kushner. But in the lead up to January 6th, he washed his hands of his father-in-law, and so did Ivanka. Ivanka rushed in on January 6th to get her father to call off his jackals. But Jared Kushner, bad guy. He's traveling around the world, self-dealing. But after January 6th, he and Ivanka wanted nothing to do with Trump. And you might remember, they pretty much had nothing to do with the 2024 presidential campaign. Yes, after Trump won, Jared came in, but not the way he came in during the first administration. Jared is back because there's money for him, pretending to make deals with Russia, the Saudis, and the UAE. And it was Jared who reached out to Hakeem Jeffries. Why? Jared is serving as the back channel communications between Hakeem Jeffries and Donald Trump. That's how Jared Kushner is positioning himself, because Jared Kushner knows his father-in-law is going to blow this whole thing up and make it really dangerous and worse than January 6. Jared knows who his father-in-law is, what he's capable of, and what he's going to do. Now, he may not succeed, but he's going to do this. And Jared Kushner reached out to Hakeem Jeffries to create some kind of hotline to make sure what? I don't know. I mean, the last person I want negotiating peace between Hakeem Jeffries and Donald Trump is Jared Kushner. We've seen what a great job he and Steve Witkoff have done negotiating peace between Trump and Zelensky and Netanyahu and Hamas. So I'm laughing. It's not funny. This is not, Jared Kushner is not a diplomat. His father had to spent $2 million to get him into Harvard. He's an idiot. So Jared Kushner and Hakeem Jeffries spoke. If I were Hakeem Jeffries, I would be worried. He's going to be the first black speaker of the House. And in this climate, again, Trump blows things up by any means possible, and he doesn't care because he wants to blow things up. Look at Iran. Trump took Obama's deal, which looks like the Kellogg-Briand Treaty. I mean, the Obama deal with Iran is historic, and so Trump blew it up, and then he blew up the Iranian leadership, which is now more powerful today than it's ever been. But Trump destroys things. That's what he does. He destroys things with no remorse, because that's his plan. That's Donald Trump's plan. Destroy things. I think it's the economist Joseph Schumpeter. I think it's Joseph Schumpeter who came up with the term creative destruction. Or maybe it was L. Ron Hubbard. I think L. Ron Hubbard also talks about creative destruction. You have to destroy things before you can create something new. Failed New York real estate tycoons like Donald Trump call it just destroy things. That's what Trump wants to do. He just wants to destroy things. Because if you destroy things, if you're Donald Trump, you destroy things because that way you can borrow money to rebuild and then declare bankruptcy. You don't rebuild and keep all the money you borrowed. Destroy things and then blame everybody else. That's how Trump works. Destroy the White House. That's what he's doing. Look at the White House. He only knows how to destroy things. And the problem is, this time around, when it comes to our republic, He knows what he's doing this time. During the first Trump administration, as you all know, he was surrounded by people who still wanted to preserve our nearly 250-year history. But now, every sociopath has poured into the White House to come work for him, so together they can steal money, seek revenge, and destroy things. They don't care. They want to destroy things. They like to blow things up. We cannot fight Iran anymore because Trump wanted to see things getting blowed up. His daily intelligence brief during the height of the war was just videos of things in Iran getting blowed up. And now Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is talking about fighting Iran through sanctions because we don't have any missiles. And he's calling it economic D-Day. Economic D-Day. That's what he called it yesterday, economic D-Day. On D-Day, we stormed the beaches of Normandy. Trump can't storm the beaches of Hormuz. Instead, he's making it more expensive for the Ayatollah to buy toothpaste. That's how Trump is going to be Eisenhower. He destroys everything, and they are going to destroy the midterms. That's the plan. And then they're going to destroy the entire legislative branch. If I can't win the midterms, I will destroy them. If I can't control the legislative branch, I will destroy it. And honestly, I get it. I do. I totally get that. A little part of me gets that. We all get it. We were all 3-year-olds jealous of our baby brother. Our baby brother gets a toy. I'm not allowed to play with it. And if you're genetically predisposed towards psychopathy, the way Donald Trump and I are, you break your baby brother's toy. And you blame him. That's what some of us do. This is who we're up against. On Tuesday, Trump's lawyers told a judge that unless the president can go ahead and renovate the Kennedy Center, and by renovate, put his name on it, Trump will have no choice but to declare the Kennedy Center too dangerous, and they will tear it down. Trump is now threatening to tear the Kennedy Center down unless he can get his name on it. And that's not just Trump. It's everyone around him and everyone who voted for him. I'm not smart. I'm not rich. I'm not educated. I'm not healthy. I don't have a job, a wife, children, or a sense of self I can be proud of. So instead of improving my life, you destroy the lives of the people who have all the things I don't have. That's how it works. There is no greater thrill for Donald Trump and the people living vicariously through him, no greater thrill than watching him destroy Dr. Anthony Fauci, a good, decent, hardworking, and well-paid scientist, rightfully so, who, despite some minor miscalculations, Dr. Anthony Fauci, doctor, exemplifies a life well lived. Destroy him and blame him, Fauci, for COVID. Because it can't be Trump's fault. Funny thing, Trump was Fauci's boss. Trump never fired him. Fauci was horrible, corrupt, doing bioweapons research with whatever these lies are. He was so corrupt, Donald Trump never fired him. So Trump is going to destroy the midterms. And instead of Fauci, this time he's going to blame the post office. This is how it's working. So I'm going to go over the Supreme Court ruling yesterday, which kind of surprised me. This is who the fall guy is going to be. David Steiner, who currently serves as our nation's 76th Postmaster General, friend of Trump's. He's the patsy. Appointed by Trump, David Steiner, the Postmaster General. His previous employer was Waste Management. I'm not making this up. Waste Management. If I'm not mistaken, that was Tony Soprano's old job. Whenever Tony was asked, what do you do for a living? He'd say, I'm in waste management. And Tony was in waste management. Tony controlled the garbage routes in Jersey. But the corporation Waste Management, well, that's the name of an actual corporation that handles waste management, garbage routes all over the country. And let's just say it's had a problematic history. People in waste management at the top of the food, the compost chain, shall we say. And that's who Donald Trump put in charge of our post office. The capo de tutti capi of waste management, David Steiner. He is literally the capo de tutti capi of waste management. Well, he was. Now he's the capo de tutti capi of the post office. And you're going to hear David Steiner's name a lot. Should our Supreme Court allow Trump to go ahead with his scheme to destroy the midterms, because Trump is setting this guy up, David Steiner, to be the next Fauci. So I have a lot to get to, and I'm going to plow through it, because if I don't get through it today, I'm going to just have a backlog after Labor Day. So here's the thing to remember about Trump. He's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing, but at the same time, he knows exactly what he's doing, because Trump is 80, and he's morphed into the most dangerous kind of monster, a dim-witted sociopath with wisdom. The man has wisdom. Trump is a stupid sociopath with wisdom. And if your life force is destroying things, well, being a dim-witted sociopath with wisdom is all you're going to need. Trump and the people he surrounds himself with are going to destroy the midterms, and in so doing will then try to make it impossible for the new Congress to be seated. And he's got a much better team for the Green Bay sweep this time around. The quarterback this time has a much better team. And he doesn't want to win the midterms. He wants to steal it. Because in his fevered mind, anybody can win an election. He already did that in 2024. I want to try to steal one, because I didn't get to steal it in 2020. Okay. He's looking at his White House, the Republican Party, his 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, the majorities right now in both the House and the Senate. He looks at all that the way a 19-year-old test drives a Lamborghini. Let's see what this beast is capable of. So, why is Hakeem Jeffries talking to Jared Kushner? Well, you and I all remember January 6th. But I suspect Hakeem Jeffries also remembers January 8th, 2023 down in Brazil. Do you remember Jair Bolsonaro, who is sitting in a prison cell right now, convicted of, among other things, plotting to kidnap and kill the current president, the man who defeated Bolsonaro, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva? Bolsonaro also attempted to kidnap and kill Vice President Geraldo Alckmin and Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes right after Bolsonaro lost the 2022 presidential election to Lula. On January 8th, 2023, around the time Lula was supposed to take office, Bolsonaro supporters stormed Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court. And you know what the plan was? Kill Lula. That's why Bolsonaro is sitting in a prison right now. Kill Lula and some other people as well. Luckily, Bolsonaro's coup failed, and he headed out of town. He got out of town. Right before returning to Brazil to face the samba music, do you know where Bolsonaro hid out? Mar-a-Lago. He fled and hid out in Florida. Before returning to Brazil to go on trial, Jair Bolsonaro was the keynote speaker at Matt Schlapp's CPAC event, the big one, in March of 2023. So January 8th, 2023, coup d'etat in Brazil, try to kill Lula. 2 months after staging this failed coup, in which Jair Bolsonaro was convicted for planning to kidnap and kill his opponent, Lula, the current president, Lula, as well as kill the vice president and a justice on the Supreme Court, Jair Bolsonaro was welcomed at CPAC's big event at Maryland, treated like a hero. And then a year later, while Bolsonaro was facing a criminal investigation for plotting to kill Lula, CPAC held a big event in Brazil to celebrate Bolsonaro. He was their keynote speaker. And now he's sitting in a prison for plotting to kidnap and kill the guy who beat him in the 2022 presidential election. And you know what Trump did last year after his buddy Bolsonaro was shipped off to prison? Trump imposed a 50% tariff on all Brazilian imports. Why? He said it was to punish Brazil for all its censorship and witch hunts leading to Bolsonaro's conviction. He said Bolsonaro was unfairly treated, so I'm imposing a 50% tariff on all Brazilian imports. But because he's stupid, he didn't know that we sell more. We run a trade surplus with Brazil. So he went, oops, and he rescinded the tariffs. He froze U.S. assets belonging to the Supreme Court justice who prosecuted Bolsonaro. And last year, this prick, our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, revoked visas for 7 Supreme Court justices who were involved in the prosecution of Bolsonaro. The justices appointed by Bolsonaro, however, they are perfectly free to travel here to the United States, but the ones engaged in that witch hunt are forbidden from traveling to the United States. This is why Hakeem Jeffries is talking to Jared Kushner. He knows how dangerous it's going to be attempting to take the gavel from Mike Johnson. He remembers January 8th, 2023 in Brazil. You know what they call Jair Bolsonaro? Trump of the tropics. Maybe that photo was doctored. But, and he also remembers January 6th, 2021, when Mike Pence refused to leave the Capitol. He refused to accept, Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, refused to accept the protection offered by Donald Trump's Secret Service because Mike Pence, the Vice President, feared they would deliver him to Donald Trump, thereby putting Mike Pence's life in danger. Mike Pence didn't trust Donald Trump's Secret Service on January 6th. He said, I'm going to stay in the Capitol. I'm fine right here. The days of peaceful transitions of power, thanks to Donald Trump, are now over. Democracy requires constant vigilance. And always remember, it's much easier to destroy a democratic republic than preserve one. The same way it's a lot easier to bomb Iran than it is to negotiate a deal with Iran the way Obama did. It's a lot easier to destroy Obamacare, like the Republicans are doing now, than it is to offer up a replacement, which they don't have. Democracy requires constant vigilance. Brazil is holding presidential elections this year. And once again, their democracy is under threat. The first round is October 4th. President Lula is running for re-election. And you know who Lula's challenger is? Senator Flavio Bolsonaro. That would be Bolsonaro's son. That's why Hakeem Jeffries is talking to Trump's son-in-law. It's dangerous. Now, this is non-negotiable. You may not want to believe this. We have a Republican Party taken over by authoritarians who view elections as a nuisance, as do way too many Americans, including voters. It's not just the oligarchs who get seduced by the temptations of fascism. Since Athens and ancient Rome, democratic republics have always given way to dictators, authoritarians, at the behest of a plurality of voters or their elected representatives inside their government. In the 21st century, authoritarians seize power, usually by rigging elections. They do it by presenting to a plurality of voters just enough fear, just enough scapegoats for that plurality of voters to justify a willingness to surrender all their civil liberties. We've seen it in El Salvador. That's where we're shipping immigrants to, their torture chamber in El Salvador. El Salvadoran voters had it with the gangs. They elected a cool dictator. That's what he calls himself, a cool dictator. Up until 2022 in Brazil. Up until this year in Hungary. And now here in the United States. I'm not saying a majority of American voters are willing to hand everything over to Donald Trump and the Republicans. I'm saying 33% are. Right now, 33% are. That's before this country is scared and angry. What's going to happen on January 3rd or by January 3rd, 2027? Trump and his crew will have done such a great job convincing just enough Americans the midterms were stolen, that the communists, jihadists, Hamas are staging a revolution inside our country, that Muslims and migrants flooded the border to vote, not just to vote, but to rape and eat your pets. He will convince just enough that Congress is completely out of control so that by January 3rd, 2027, a majority of Americans will still think Donald Trump is completely full of Trump. He will not convince a majority of Americans. But that 33% right now willing to give it all to Trump, by January 3rd, 2027, it'll be up to 45%. But 33% is all you need. 33% is all you need. 34%, 36%. Hitler only got 36, 37%. You need just a militant plurality. Because if you're not in the business of counting ballots, caring about the will of the people, 33%, plenty. It's plenty, it's enough. What I keep telling you is this isn't Nazi Germany. There are other examples, other analogs. I mean, it could be Nazi Germany, but there are plenty of other analogs from our hemisphere. What I'm telling you is fascism is an alternative. It is a real thing. It's an option. It's a political ideology that was catching on here in the United States right up until the Japanese bombed us on December 7th. It's catching on again by another name. Because World War II, fascism became a dirty word. But fascism is an organizing principle, a way to govern. It is still very much alive right here in America by another name. Nobody is going to say they're fascists. They say they're MAGA or Christian nationalists, whatever they call themselves. It's Republican. It's Republican. That's what this party has morphed into because Donald Trump took over the Republican Party. And this iteration of the Republican Party does not believe in free and fair elections because they don't trust the American people. That is why Hakeem Jeffries met with Jared Kushner, because if this election goes the way we think it's going, he's about to become the first black Speaker of the House. And that is going to be tough for a lot of people in this country who voted for Trump. It's going to be tough for them to accept Hakeem Jeffries. An argument could be made. The reason Trump got elected in 2016 was because Obama had been president for 8 years. It's why Harris lost, partly because she's a woman, but also because she's a black woman. Michelle Obama has talked about this. So, look, the people on January 6th were looking to hang Mike Pence. We know. You don't have to be told. we have to win the Senate. The House, even if we win the House, he can't pull this crap if we win the Senate. But, so look, the question is no longer, can it happen here? It did. We are living under an authoritarian regime. We are living under an authoritarian regime. Not everything has to be Nazi Germany. You can commit genocide without wiping out everybody. In fact, Hitler didn't wipe out everybody. You can be guilty of ethnic cleansing without wiping out everybody. Hitler didn't wipe out everybody. You can live in an authoritarian regime without everybody in concentration camps. Not everything is Nazi Germany. Nearly all the authoritarian regimes around the world right now and throughout the mid to late 20th century are, in some measure, what we kind of have right now in America. I'm not saying we're North Korea, but we do have a system where the people living under the regime have no idea they're living in an authoritarian regime. That's how you be an authoritarian. People don't know they're living under fascism. They hold elections in Russia. They hold elections in Hungary. This year, they turned out great. When Duterte ran the Philippines, they had elections. Iran holds elections. Saudi Arabia doesn't. Egypt, El Salvador, they hold elections. They hold elections here in America. And a plurality of the people living in all of those countries, a plurality, could never imagine that at any time they were living under an authoritarian regime. And fascism is an option, meaning it can come, it can go, it can come back again, it could go in and out of favor. Sometimes regimes are voted out of office, like in the Philippines, Hungary this year, Brazil in 2022. And sometimes those regimes are voted out of office, but America says not so fast, like in Egypt. We didn't like the results in Egypt. Not so fast. Sometimes the authoritarians can be voted out and then back in. Fascism is a real thing here in America. It's on the menu. It's on the menu. And most authoritarian regimes have a modicum of resistance. Putin has resistance. A lot of people are falling out of windows. Pussy Riot. I mean, there still are people running against him and ending up being in prison, but there's always resistance. Even Hitler had resistance. They try to blow him up. Valkyrie, you saw that movie. So just because there's resistance here in the United States, just because we appear to have a free and open press, although that's no longer really the case, just because we appear to be holding free and open elections, although that's not really the case, just because we have judges and local politicians who stand for the rule of law, Just because we have or appear to have all those things, it doesn't mean we're not living under an authoritarian regime. The war with Iran is the most unpopular war in modern American history. Donald Trump says, I don't care. He looks at the polls, doesn't care. Trump doesn't care. Does he care that his approval ratings are at record lows? Yeah, it bothers him, but it doesn't stop him. Maybe it hurts his feelings, but everything and everyone hurts Donald Trump's feelings. If hurt feelings could stop Donald Trump, he would have quit 80 years ago. This is what we're up against right now. In order to be a leader, you need to be sick in the head. You got to be sick in the head to. Biden was pushing 80, and what 80-year-old man wants to be president? Somebody who's really sick in the head. Obama, small children, 2 young daughters, and he wants to be president? You know how sick that is to want to be president with 2 small daughters? You can do that. He was young. Now is the time Obama should be running for president. But there's a pathology here, but the pathology of a good and decent, patriotic American politician, the pathology is a desperate desire to be loved by everyone. Bill Clinton's pathology, Biden's pathology, Lyndon Johnson's pathology was they needed to be loved by as many people as possible. Reagan, as destructive as he was, he still wanted to be loved by everyone. And not being loved by everyone hurts them so deeply, it stops them in their tracks. That's a good trait for a leader, that desperate desire to be loved by everyone. But Trump came into politics already knowing he's never going to get everyone to love him. It's what makes him so dangerous. It's also what makes him such a great comedian. As a comedian, he doesn't pander to the audience when he's pandering to the audience. He remains true to who he is. He's a liar who panders to the audience, and the audience is in on the pander. And that's what makes him so funny. He tells you exactly what he's doing while he's doing it. He is a meta comedian. Have you seen the riff he does on inventing the term Democrats? Have you seen this? Where he explains why it's funny. First, he calls the Democrats Democrats, and then he explains to the audience why it's funny. He says, most people don't know the word dumb has a B in it. So I got rid of the B and replaced the E in Dem with a U, and now they're Democrats. Have you ever seen him do this bit? It is absolutely hysterical. It's a joke on a joke on a joke. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. That's when I miss pot, because if I were smoking pot, watching him do the Democrat routine, I'd be going, that's the president of the United States, killing it. He's hysterical. Conan O'Brien said something that was absolutely brilliant, and said it, 10 years ago. I don't know when he said it, but he said, this changed how I look at comedy. He said, Conan O'Brien says, great comedy is when incredibly smart people behave incredibly stupid. And that informed how I viewed comedy. After I heard him say that, and I went, oh my God, that's the Rosetta Stone to comedy. Find really smart people and make them act stupid. And everything I watched reinforced that until Trump became president. Turns out Conan got it wrong. Really great comedy is find the dumbest person in the world and make him act smarter than he actually is. That is so much funnier, Conan. When I watch Trump, I'm reminded of why I always laugh whenever I see a chimpanzee dressed as a British barrister. That's who Trump is. A chimpanzee dressed as a British barrister. And by the way, it's cruel to dress chimpanzees up as British barristers. But that's what makes it funny, the cruelty. I'm a vegan. I'm against showbiz chimps. I'm against show business. I think show business is cruel to everyone, children, chimps, adults. Anyway, Trump is funny. And like all the really, really great comedians, he knows he's funny. When someone tells me a comedian isn't for everybody, that means this comedian is funny. That's what makes a great comedian, when they're not for everybody. So Trump doesn't need the masses to love him. He's got his select audience. He doesn't need to sell out Madison Square Garden. He can play the Beacon, play to 2,000 people at the Beacon. That's good enough for Trump. Trump knows life is unfair because his life has been unfair. At least that's his sociopathy. People have been so unfair to me. That's who Trump is. And so he's got this shell. Life is unfair. I'm treated unfairly. I don't need to be loved by everyone. That has all the makings of a great comedian and a dictator. When you don't need to be loved by everybody. Now, Trump divides the world into winners and losers. He thinks all anyone ever understands is winning. Winning by any means necessary. And it doesn't matter how you got there. It only counts that you're there. We now have a Republican Party empowered by this pathology. It's a pathology that has been turned into a source of energy. It's pathological. Nixon, even Nixon knew to resign. Nixon, not as corrupt as Trump, but he was horrible. Like Trump, he knew life was unfair. Like Trump, Nixon knew that not everyone was going to love him like they loved the Kennedys. Nixon knew, I'm not lovable. He had Trump's pathology. It was Nixon who always quoted Vince Lombardi, who created the Green Bay sweep. It was Nixon who always quoted Vince Lombardi, who coined the phrase, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. That was Nixon's mantra after he heard Vince Lombardi say that. Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. It only matters if you win. That's what Watergate was. But even Nixon knew when he lost. They came to him August 7th, August 6th. He resigned August 8th, I think, of 74. They came, Barry Goldwater, the Republican, it's over. All right, I lost. Not Trump. Never admits defeat. You know what the last thing Trump said on January 6th to his staff? As the Capitol was in smoldering ruins, the last thing he said was, boy, Mike Pence really let me down today. Trump never admits defeat. Never. This has permeated our Republican Party and our culture. Not just never admit defeat, never admit you made a mistake. You have to sue Fox News for them to issue a correction. By the way, CNN was off for 30 minutes. They had a technical flub, and 30 minutes was off for 30 minutes on Monday. Highest ratings they ever got. That is, so you don't need to be loved by everybody in Trump's world. Republicans, they don't think they need to be loved by everybody. They've given up on love. Fox News doesn't have to be loved by everyone. You just need to be loved by enough. Here's something that I should wrap it up, but if I don't get this out of my system today, this is interesting. You know, the most popular show on Fox News averages 3.1 million viewers per episode. Now, we know how influential Fox News is. Most popular show on Fox News, on average, gets 3.1 million viewers. There are 360 million Americans. 3.1 million viewers is 0.919% of Americans. That's not even 1% of Americans. But as we've seen from Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, 1%, that's all you need. The 1%. They control everything. That's why Republicans, MAGA, Trump, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, they know they're unpopular. They know most people hate them. But Fox News, all you need is 0.919%. The 1%, everybody hates the 1%. And if they don't, you're not paying attention. Everybody hates them. Everybody hates Trump. But he has 30% of this country loves Trump. Look at the math here. If he's got 30% of the country loving him, he's beyond a superstar. You get him up to 34, 36, 38%. That's all Hitler needed. That's all you need. And Republicans know this, so they do whatever he says. And they know they're hated. Republican lawmakers know they're hated. And they tell their kids, they justify it to themselves. We do unpopular things for the good of our country because the mob is dangerous. The mob is dangerous. People don't know what's really good for them. Privately, they will say, of course we're not going to win, so we cheat for the good of the country. That's how they justify stealing the midterms, clinging to this Madisonian mistrust of the mob. This Madisonian mistrust, which left us burdened with a Senate and an electoral college. We should get rid of the Senate and the electoral college. But that was Madison. That was, you can't trust the mob. So this brings me to our wildly unpopular Supreme Court that only has to answer to the 1%. We're almost 60 days before early voting begins. And that means mail-in ballots around the country are being printed. And in some states, they're going to get sent out. The mail-in ballots get sent out next week, early next month, in weeks. And it's up to the 6-3 conservative majority currently sitting on our Supreme Court to decide, maybe this week or next, whether we're going to be able to actually vote by mail in these midterms. Now, it's confusing because it's supposed to be. Trump is a merchant of chaos, and the people working to steal this election feed off the Byzantine architecture of our voting laws to confound everyone, including themselves. They want to get everyone's head spinning and then reduce it all down, not even to a sound bite. Now it's just a prehistoric grunt. Voter integrity, which means nothing. It's simplistic, but they're saying only citizens should vote. Okay. And that's why here in America, only citizens vote. It's not an issue. What Trump is trying to do is give the federal government, specifically the Department of Homeland Security, authority to decide who gets a mail-in ballot and who doesn't. This isn't about stopping citizens from voting. It's stopping non-citizens from voting. Actually, it's about stopping certain types of citizens from voting. And this stuff is hard to understand. And when things are hard to understand, they're ripe for mischief. So I want to walk you through some of this if you're still here, because we're looking at a replay of January 6th, but this time there's nobody inside the executive branch, nobody inside our military who will stop Trump. On Monday, the Supreme Court surprised even me by reversing a lower court's ruling that had blocked Donald Trump's executive order that was signed in March. Now, Trump signed an executive order in March that essentially nationalized every single mail-in ballot in America. His executive order gives him the power to decide who can vote by mail and who can't. 1/3 of Americans vote by mail. And it's starting. It's starting. The votes, the midterms are starting. And our Supreme Court ruled on Monday, Trump's executive order can go ahead. He can go ahead with these plans. And then, as he begins to administer his executive order, then the plaintiffs have standing to file a new lawsuit and ask the courts to stop Trump. What is going on here? You know, courts do fishing expeditions. They take a case and they say, oh, and by the way, no to this. Not even apropos. Like they threw this out saying, oh, you don't have standing. The Supreme Court can take a decision on fishing in Lake Erie and use that as literally, as they call them, fishing expeditions, and use that as an excuse to rule that the Muslim ban is unconstitutional. They can do whatever they want. So they're allowing this executive order, at least for the time being, to stay in effect. And the post office is moving ahead with these plans. On the last show, I talked about the Purcell principle. The Purcell principle. which up until this year was the Supreme Court's guiding principle that whatever election laws the states are challenging or passing, they can pass these laws, they can approve these maps, but they cannot go into effect during the current election cycle. That's basically what the Purcell Principle ruling was, and it's 20 years old. It says you want to rewrite a map, you want to change how voting takes place, you want to pass laws, fine, but they can't go into effect in the middle of an election. This Supreme Court threw out the Purcell Principle. The Calais decision earlier this year gutted a section of the Voting Rights Act mandating that states, especially from the old Confederacy, draw congressional maps to create districts that have what are called majority-minority districts. Basically, a majority of people of color. Majority-minority means the majority of the people in this district belong to a minority group. The thinking back then, I think it was 1965. There were two Civil Rights Acts. I think the Voting Rights Act was 65. The thinking back then was, okay, you segregate black people. You've been doing this since the end of the Civil War. Jim Crow, segregation has forced black people to live huddled together. So the Voting Rights Act said you have to give these portions of the state where black people are clustered together, you have to create congressional districts so they can send representatives to Congress. For example, Manhattan isn't part of the old Confederacy. It almost was, by the way. There was so much money to be made that a lot of the investor class inside Manhattan, they were thinking of seceding along with the South. But Manhattan isn't part of the old Confederacy. Staten Island is. Staten Island. So I don't live in Harlem, but we all know who lives in Harlem. That's Upper Manhattan, has a reputation for being mostly black and Hispanic. That is what you call a majority-minority district, meaning a majority of the people living in Harlem belong to a minority group, Puerto Rican, Dominican, black. And they send, because that New York State protects that district, doesn't water it down, they always elect a person of color to Congress. And that was a section of the Voting Rights Act, which I don't think applied to Manhattan, but the Voting Rights Act said, if you're going to segregate minorities, draw congressional maps so they get representation. Okay. The court this year in the Calais decision ruled that part of the Voting Rights Act, done. No more majority-minority congressional districts. And the Purcell Principle, which said can't change election law in the middle of an election, they said, yes, you can. Now you can. Alito said to Louisiana, where the Calais decision first originated, Alito said, go ahead, start rewriting your maps. Get rid of that black congressional district. Samuel Alito threw out the Purcell decision in an emergency ruling. He said the problem of majority-minority congressional districts is so grave in the South, so pressing, we have to abandon the Purcell principle immediately and start getting rid of these all-black congressional districts. This is the Supreme Court that's going to rule on Donald Trump's mail-in ballot scheme. And here's what we saw this summer: an unprecedented rush to disenfranchise black voters, especially in Alabama. I've never seen what happened in Alabama. You'd have to go back to the, 60s. They canceled a primary in Alabama mid-election to get rid of a black congressional district. And I went, what? And the court was fine with it. Back in May, early voting in the primaries, Alabama primaries, had already begun. The ballots, the mail-in ballots, sent out. But the state of Alabama, Kay Ivey, the governor, Republican, voided that election. She voided the mail-in ballots, saying this all-black congressional district no longer exists. Have you ever heard of such a thing, at least in the 21st century? Stopping an election while it's going on, voiding mail-in ballots? This was in May, the primaries in Alabama, where new maps were being drawn. Canceled, ballots voided. They held the primaries earlier this month. Nobody talks about this because Trump's a merchant of chaos. Who can keep track? Last week, we had those primaries in Florida. Those are brand new congressional maps signed into law on May 4th. New districts that favor white Republicans. And the Supreme Court is now fine with that. They're fine with new maps in the middle of an election year because the wheels of justice always move slowly unless it's keeping black people from being represented in Washington, D.C. Then the wheels of justice are like a Lamborghini. Now, with early voting in 62 days, the Supreme Court is still allowing Trump's executive order to federalize mail-in ballots. They're allowing him to do this. Now, one would think they're going to stop it, but they're playing with fire. We're getting close to the edge here. And now the court has one or possibly two gifts they can hand to Donald Trump. One is they let his executive order stand. They could go as far as saying no more mail-in ballots or something along the lines of only for senior citizens or only for people who are disabled. But what they can really give Trump, and this is just as good as option one, give Trump the gift of confusion. And I think that's what's going to happen. Hand down a ruling so close to the midterms, nobody understands it. It's kind of left to the states to figure out what the ruling actually says. And that will give Trump and his Republicans just enough ammunition to block the new Congress from getting seated. Just enough ammunition for Americans to believe what it is they want to believe. And that means you and I are going to peacefully protest. But when we peacefully protest, that will give Trump enough ammunition to invoke his emergency powers. We know that. We know massive protests will be twisted so that Trump will claim this is a national emergency and what? Dissolve Congress? Take a look at his emergency powers. Refuse to seat the new Congress? If Mike Johnson appoints himself clerk, he's speaker. Essentially, he's the de facto speaker on January 3rd when the new Congress is sworn in. Or Trump can do what he really wants to do and shut the entire government down and rule by fiat. I mean, that's what he wants to do. It's no longer a hypothetical. We're not saying, this is not like, I'm scaring you. You all know this. It's the authoritarian playbook. Create a crisis so frightening the people, not everybody, but enough people beg you to take away their civil liberties. And that allows Mein Fuhrer to consolidate even more power. Got to scare them first. Trump signed an executive order back in March that, as I said, nationalized 1/3 of the vote, the mail-in ballots. Now, there's no way the Supreme Court should allow this. The Constitution specifically says all elections must be administered by the states. This is federalism, states' rights. The states send members to the House of Representatives. They send members to the Senate. Every 4 years, they send electors to the Electoral College. They're certified state by state. That's federalism. The federal government is a product of the states. It's the states. It's in the Constitution. It's the states who dictate their own election laws. How and when votes are counted, how elections are administered, it's up to the states. And if you're going to change election laws inside the federal government, you can't change them through an executive order. It is the states, not the federal government, that certifies the results of a congressional election. Even in a federal election, the states certify who was elected to the House, the Senate, and the Electoral College. Individually. They certify an election for president after counting all of the certified electoral votes. Trump, supposedly for states' rights, is now saying, no. He's claiming millions of immigrants are illegally voting. Of course, he can't prove it. Whenever they ask for proof, can't prove it. Now, these claims of election fraud didn't start with Trump. They date back to war criminal George W. Bush and Karl Rove. They kind of created this lie. Back then, it wasn't the immigrants voting. It was people voting 100 times, stuffing ballots. Trump expanded on George W. Bush's lie by claiming millions of immigrants are flooding the border to vote for Democrats. There's absolutely no proof. And this is the lie that he's using to possibly eliminate mail-in ballots, making it impossible for marginalized communities to vote. It's a big lie. Big, big lie. Hitler in Mein Kampf, like I would have to tell Donald Trump this, Hitler writes that the lie has to be so big, so outrageous, any person of moral character would be forced to believe it because they're incapable of imagining someone making these outrageous claims without evidence. They just can't. Hitler says most people are good, so they will believe the most outrageous lie, figuring it has to be true. Nobody would say that. That's the magic of the big lie. And Trump gets that. The lie has to be so unbelievable, and you keep repeating it. People think nobody would keep repeating this amazing lie if it were a lie. It has to be true. Hitler, Goebbels, tiny little lies people don't believe. Big, big lies. Just keep repeating it. So, Karl Rove, George W. Bush, they repeated the lie of voter fraud. Doesn't happen in the United States. But by repeating the lie of voter fraud, it gives Republicans permission to pass voter suppression laws, make it harder for marginalized communities to vote, convince just enough people voter fraud is real, and they will support your voter suppression laws that make it impossible for marginalized communities to cast their ballots. Well, 1/3 of Americans rely on mail-in ballots, including Donald Trump. He wants to eliminate them. But actually, he doesn't want to eliminate mail-in ballots. He wants to eliminate them in swing districts that are turning blue. And this is how he plans to do it, and I'm going to wrap it up. If I don't get through this, then I can't do my next show. I don't want this hanging over my head. So let me just finish this up here. This is how he's going to do it. And it's genius. It's rooted in another lie. The first lie is millions of immigrants are flooding the border voting for Democrats. That's the first lie. The second lie is the government can't do anything right. The government is inefficient, constantly makes mistakes. That's the other lie, but he's going to use that lie to keep marginalized communities from voting and not get the blame for destroying the midterms. Here's his plan. It's genius. So far, the Supreme Court is letting it play out. Somehow, between now and the midterms, if this plan goes into effect, the Department of Homeland Security will release a master list of U.S. citizens who are eligible to vote. And that master list will be verified by the Social Security Administration. So they want to create a master list of who's a United States citizen and who isn't. So this isn't just for so-called election integrity. This is for something far nefarious. Who's on the list? Who's not on the list? 100 million Americans don't belong here. That's according to the people working closely with Trump. Now, 360 some odd million people live in America. When you talk to people around Trump, 100 million of us don't belong here. And that's the number they've settled on. There's a Republican candidate for railroad commissioner in Texas, which is arguably more powerful than the governor of Texas. He just said 100 million people in this country have to go. Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol commander, has stated repeatedly he was the one rounding up people in Charlotte, in Los Angeles, and in Minnesota, Chicago. Greg Bovino repeatedly says 100 million Americans have to go. Last year, Homeland Security put out a tweet saying 100 million Americans have to go. It starts with election integrity, a master list of who's a citizen, who's not, a database. And then the Department of Homeland Security, according to this executive order, will work with the post office to make certain that every single mail-in ballot in all 50 states is sent only to U.S. citizens. Again, we're 2 months away from the midterms. Mail-in ballots right now are getting printed. As we speak, they're about to get sent out. Trump's executive order, which is still in effect, demands that every state issue mail-in ballots with barcodes that can then be scanned into a computer to make certain that barcode matches the national database of American citizens. What that does is it federalizes all mail-in ballots, and it gives the post office, which is supposed to be independent, but it's not, gives the post office and Homeland Security the power to toss out any mail-in ballot Homeland Security deems is being sent to a non-citizen. 1/3 of all the votes. Trump wants to control 1/3 of all the votes. Now, you know how this works. The big lie is government can't do anything right. So when the Trump hits the fan and there's mass confusion, Trump is going to say, well, it's the government. We got to privatize the post office. It's the post office's fault, not Homeland Security. The way this works is you start expunging likely Democratic voters in zip codes that are likely to vote Democrat. And you accidentally say, oops, we thought you weren't a citizen. That's how Jeb Bush tried to steal and did steal Florida for his brother in 2000. You scrub the voting rolls. You look for, this is what they did. They look for black-sounding last names. They find somebody named Roosevelt or Jefferson in prison, can't vote, or just released from prison, can't vote, and then you just scrub every Jefferson in Florida living in a certain zip code, and then you go, oops, sorry. It's pure, it's what it is. It's the genius, I guess, of Trump. He breaks things. That's what he does. He's the son of a builder, and you can't build in New York without first breaking things. Evicting tenants, tearing down a building, destroying a community, and all the lives around and inside of it. In New York real estate, you lie, you cheat, you have to work with the mob, you pay off inspectors and the cops, because in the end, All that matters is Trump Tower. He knew everyone, not everyone, but enough people will see Trump Tower and say, well, you got to break a few eggs to create an omelet. And they forget the thousands of lives destroyed, thousands of laws broken, the ugliness, cruelty, and deceit that went into the building of Trump Tower. As Hitler said before exterminating 6 million Jews, who remembers the Armenians? That's what Hitler said. The Turks slaughtered the Armenians at the beginning of the 20th century. And when people said, Mein Führer, what about the backlash? He said, trust me, the world will forget what we're doing. Who remembers the Armenians? And we see the world is forgetting. Trump's plan really is to destroy the midterms, not to win the midterms, destroy them, based on two lies. Millions of immigrants are voting, and the government can't do anything right. It's going to use that excuse, the government can't do anything right around November 4th, after the midterms. If the executive order is allowed to go into effect, and it is right now going into effect, it's just a question of when the Supreme Court will stop it, or if his executive order is allowed to play out, millions of American citizens, especially in Detroit, Wisconsin, the suburbs of Cleveland, where Max Miller is having a rough time, Philadelphia, the suburbs where, you get some white Republicans getting elected to the House. Anywhere you have a large Black or Hispanic population, anywhere you have colleges where students can vote, first, millions of Americans who requested mail-in ballots, they won't get them. 1/3 of Americans vote by mail-in ballots. You request a mail-in ballot, how many are going to notice, hey, my mail-in ballot never arrived? And what you will see eventually by like a week before the midterms, Black, Hispanic, college students showing up, complaining to the city clerks that I didn't get my mail-in ballot. This will be happening in marginalized communities like Gary, Indiana right now. I didn't get my mail-in ballot. And there'll be chaos, and the visuals will work in Trump's favor, because all we'll see on the news is Black people, Hispanics, privileged college kids yelling at city clerks, where's my mail-in ballot? And they're saying, it's not us. The federal government didn't send it to you. And Trump will say, the government can't do anything right. Look at those broken Black cities, Hispanic cities. They can't administer elections. They can't count the vote. This is why they can't be trusted. They cheat. Look at the chaos there. And that's all we're going to see is Black, Hispanic people demanding their mail-in ballots from clerks in marginalized communities. And Americans will believe the lie that government can't do anything right, especially governments that are controlled by Democrats. Blame the victims. Blame the victims. And Trump has an army of lawyers ready to challenge every ballot in every precinct that flipped from red to blue. All right, I'm going to wrap it up because I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. If you stuck with me, thank you. I have some robot shit here from the robot games, some humanoids. These are actual robots at the robot games in China over the weekend. Look at this. These are real robots. This is not AI. This is actual robots in China. Oh no! What's going on? Oh, are they gay? All right, that's okay. That's okay. That's good. Okay. Oh wait, they're Republicans. They're gay and they're Republicans. They hate being gay, so they're beating up on each other. What else do we have here? We have humanoids breaking records at the Beijing robot games. What do we have here? I think a humanoid broke Usain Bolt's 100-meter dash record, and I have some artificial intelligence this is real, authentic artificial intelligence of these humanoids racing at in Beijing at the humanoid games. Look at this. This is just incredible. See, they're not saddled with human emotion. It's all about winning. They don't get distracted. They're just focused on victory. See, the guy, oh wait, they're acting like humans. They're worried about, they're acting like humans. They're kicking a man down or a robot down when he's weak. Yeah, that's pretty human. What do we have here? We have, I'm going to end with, hang on. This is the humanoids relaxing after the event. Wow. That's nothing wrong there. They're not juicing. They're just relaxing after the humanoid games. Well, let me tell you something. If you're still watching, and I don't know why you would be, I now have a treat for you. You deserve a treat, and I probably shouldn't show this to you, but it's so late in the show. This is robot dressage. You're about to see robot dressage. The horse is a robot. The rider is a robot. And as long as Crazy Larry, the robot, doesn't run onto the floor, this is going to be beautiful. Let's watch. Wow, that's beautiful. Just let's make sure Crazy Larry doesn't run on to the field. Okay, that's robot dressage. There's Crazy Larry. Oh no, it's Crazy Larry. Oh, damn it. I hate Crazy Larry. Crazy Larry is so sick. Oh, that's so bad. Yeah, Crazy Larry the robot. All right. I don't know if I should have done that. But I figured if you're still watching and you put up with my crap, you're Crazy Larry the robot. You like my crap. Please like this episode. Maybe not. This one went on a little too long. It's late August. I shouldn't be doing a show. I should be out. So, So maybe don't share this one with anyone. Thank you to anyone who's still here. Bob and Mila, if you're still here, thanks for keeping the chat room civil. And do I have anything else? I had something else that I played with. Hang on. Where is it? It's Trump's hands. Do I have Trump's hands? No, I thought I did. All right. Wrap it up, David. Shut up, David. All right. See everybody Thursday. Sorry about this show. Thursday's show will be much better. I promise.